All right, I think we are on air. So hello everyone who's watching. Thanks for stopping by, and also everyone in the future watching. I am Kristi, and I have my apartment, my flat back to all being all my own. My dad's visit is ended, so my more regular production schedule will be returning soon now that I have one less person in the house. And to kick that off, I am really pleased tonight, our time, to have Essence of Thought Peter on from we had him on the happy hour recently, and we were on Twitter and had a little exchange with Seth Andrews that had some interesting twists and turns, and I suggested we do a hangout on it. So before I start, so welcome to the show. Do you want to kind of give your take on this before we start, and give me a chance to get the screenshots right?
Okay. Yeah, it was completely out of the. When I first sort of came to it, we had a bit of a comical, satirical take on things, which we'll get into in a second. And then I got sort of added into a much more serious conversation. I just put out my thoughts on the topic, and Seth did not take kindly to it at all. He seemed rather defensive about the fact that people discuss things in a thread that he started to discuss things. So, yeah. It
And
was interesting.
yeah, and I didn't see, I think I might have not seen all of your interactions, so we'll have to check some of those out. But basically, the main topic here is Seth's idea of outrage culture and recreational outrage. And this idea that people are sort of purposefully becoming upset over things that aren't really worth getting upset over, or taking things the wrong way. So to start it out, I wanted to at least present what Seth has said on the topic himself. And to do that, I scoured back, I guess, through April, which is around the first time I heard him use this phrase, outrage, recreational outrage. He's used the phrase outrage brigade to describe those of us who had some problems with platforming a guy who said I wouldn't even rape you on Twitter, and had his followers tweet that at a member of parliament 600 times. He called that, an outrage brigade. And anyway, he likes the word outrage. So let's find out what his sort of take on this is. And I did try to honestly, find information and present what Seth said in his own words. So he's here in this tweet replying to another user who's writing, I fail to understand why Sam Harris is so misunderstood and attacked for positions he never held. Being reasonable in today's zeitgeist being reasonable is not in today's zeitgeist, to be sure. And Seth replies, I think the problem is multifold. 1, lack of charitable listening and listening in general. 2, eagerness to misunderstand or misrepresent. And 3, recreational outrage in the Twitterverse. Now, again, just to cite one more example of him using this phrase and the context in which he's using it. This is from back in January, so before I heard him use it, but he's talking about a talk given by Dr. Pinker, and he's saying, recreational outrage and the impatience and ignorance that fuel knee-jerk indignation so often cheat people understanding and the truth. There's much to be outraged about in this crazy world, but there is also a lot of unnecessary escalation, assumption, maneuvering, and misinformation that we as skeptics must commit to seeing over, walking past, or if necessary, wading through. Not everything is an excuse to freak out, and not everyone tarred and feathered by a website or pundit is an enemy. And then he goes on to defend Pinker. So with that little setup, do you think that that's accurate to sort of, at least to me, I did the best I could to find what he meant by these phrases. And what do you take away from
that? Then the general idea seems very appealing, but then there's a lot of vagueness in where the boundaries are. And of course, that's perfectly fine if you're willing to sort of discuss those boundaries at a later date. There can be outrage over ridiculous things. I remember the Szechuan sauce outrage, for example. That was
the Rick and Morty fan thing.
Yeah, that was quite sickening. There is such a thing as being outraged for no just reason. The problem, of course, can be when Seth sees himself as sort of the arbiter who gets to decide what is and what isn't, and how people should respond. The problems start to come in a little bit there. But it seems like, people can read into it as they want. It's out there for them to find. but just keeping to like the rules that he started with the example that we're about to go into. We see rule one broken immediately, in the example that we're about to go on to.
Yeah, I can pull those up so we can make
The
reference to
lack of
them.
charitable listening and listening in general. The charitable listening is specifically important to this case. So if you want to go on to that, then we can
Go
discuss
on to his
why.
tweet. Yeah, and I just want to say I agree with what you say, and I concur. I think there's when you start to lecture people on how to behave, then people have a framework with which to evaluate your own behavior
Mm-hmm.
because you've given it to them. And this is a very noble, lofty set of principles that Seth has laid out as the ones that he wants to espouse and has espoused. So when he doesn't practice them, yeah, I think it's fair to call him out.
Yes. So it's start with the original treat, I guess, by Leonard Dunham. I didn't actually know who they were until this. I'd heard of them, and I then found out where I'd heard of them before. I'd heard about them, I think it was 2016, where they'd made a statement about abortion. That was, only passing knowledge of this person. They stated, "I'd honestly rather fall into 1 million manholes than have one single dude tell me to watch my step."
So what is she saying here?
Well, for me, I saw two ways to read this. One, Dunham could be having a really, really bad day. He's just getting annoyed by being treated as incredibly fragile by everyone, in ways that men aren't treated, for example. And so is just using Twitter as a way to vent, in that moment. This is helping me sort of relieve some angst I've got, because I just hate the way that I keep getting baby handled around everything, if you will. Or it could have been a well thought out satirical point, pointing out that, on the same issue sort of thing. It could be read either way. It could be hyperbole, deliberate hyperbole, or it could just be venting. Those are the two ways that instantly just cropped up in my mind. And even if we ignore hyperbole for a second, being charitable, maybe Dunham is just having a bad day and is just venting, So being charitable, why would you then draw attention to that to make what could be a bad day even worse? Because that's all Seth's comment seems to come down to. It's sort of like, here, look at this bad thing that's going on, isn't it terrible? And then it goes into a lot of other issues as well, surrounding victim blaming, and also what about the men, as you kept pointing out.
Yes.
So, yeah.
My take on it was she's basically saying, let me make my own mistakes. That's how I read it, And also her use of the word dude.
Yes.
She doesn't say man. She doesn't say men. She says one single dude. And it's kind of, my impression of a dude is different from a man or, so I think her choice here was about being lectured and wanting to make your own mistakes, rather making your own mistakes than being mansplained to, I guess, in some ways. Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of, the dude sort of conjures up the image of the same sort of people in what have typically been male orientated or male dominated work circles, mocking their co-workers who are female, for example, so taking the mick out of female construction workers, telling them to mind their step and, all of this sort of thing. It does sort of conjure up that image rather than just men in general.
Right. So would you like to read? Since I was doing the reading for Seth before, would you like to read his response and we'll break it down?
Okay, sure. "This is the kind of nonsense that fuels those eager to paint all feminists as shrill, guy-bashing poster children for recreational outrage. Imagine if a man had seen her about to fall and said nothing, how quickly would Twitter have ruined his life? Lena, you're ridiculous." And it's just how it goes from the first half to the second half, and he doesn't realize he's doing the exact thing that he's saying others will do. And it's like, oh God.
Right. So, yeah, I didn't want to interrupt, but I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry. It's mind-boggling.
Yeah. So, he conveniently breaks it down into 3 points for us. First, he uses basically sexist stereotypes to say, you're being this kind of feminist, you're being shrill, you're being guy bashing. You are basically the problem here. not the
Mm.
sexism you're complaining about. You're the problem. And what is, he's painting her as shrill. That is what is often used. It's just a text. You have no idea what the tone is, but he assumes it's shrill.
And to me, it sounds hyperbolic, but it sounds more deliberately hyperbolic, which is why I say it might just be venting for a bad day, or it might be a deliberate exaggeration, sort of thing, just to raise an issue. Because hyperbole it's a rhetorical device. It's used in all spheres of discourse. That's yeah.
And, yeah. So you finish. Go ahead.
It's painting, someone using hyperbole as being sort of this example of this evil feminist, incarnate that people like to draw upon. It kind of turns hyperbole into a man-only thing. It's pretty much what he's saying, women can't use hyperbole, which sort of links back to the first satirical response we did. Should we quickly run through that?
Can we finish these 3 points and then we'll run through? Is that okay?
But again, when a guy does this, it's just hyperbole. It's just exaggeration. It's just to stress a point, But when a woman does it, specifically a feminist, I assume Lena Dunham is a feminist. I don't know again.
Yeah, she is. She's like a celebrity feminist. She claims to be a feminist. And
I'm terrible with celebrities of all sorts. So.
Well, she's she's more like one of those feminists in Hollywood that people critique because she's not as woke as she thinks she is. And she's also apparently committed some sort of quote unquote prank on her younger sister by sexually assaulting her that she talked about and got criticized for. So she's got, she's basically low hanging fruit when it comes to deciding to find a woman to paint as a feminist, to say feminists are problematic.
I came to this, I had no notion of the person. I just saw
you didn't have any
tweet and I just thought, what I see from this tweet and this tweet alone, all I can say is it could be venting or it could be hyperbole to make a point. And it's just the anger targeted towards this hyperbole. It's just it just comes out of nowhere. It's like, what about it? He seems to honestly think like she actually wants to go manhole diving, which, by the way, if it's not a sexual euphemism yet, definitely should be. But I don't think she generally wants to get hurt. But then again, when it comes to like manholes, very rarely they're left uncovered with nothing around them, So most of us are trusted just to notice the signs, the warnings, etc. So why is a portion of our population treated differently?
And
almost
also,
like a child.
I wanted to bring up tone policing.
Yes, that's So
tone policing is the practice of not criticizing a person's argument. It's criticizing the way that the argument is delivered. And in this case, we don't know how it's delivered, so Seth is assuming a shrill tone in order to criticize it. But instead of actually engaging with her point, which is making her own mistakes and experiencing the consequences of them and the value of that or not, he decides to assume a tone and attack her for that. And what he's basically saying is, you should only speak to me, or you should only speak in a very polite, feminine, acceptable voice. You shouldn't be angry. You shouldn't say these things when you're being hyperbolic, right? Because then that's bad messaging. Therefore, you can only speak in this small range of acceptable ways that are very pleasing and not confrontational and can't be taken the wrong way.
So what Seth's asking for is women to be submissive.
Yeah.
And Seth has a habit of doing this. This is not the first or last time we're going to be discussing this. First of all, he picks a tone that he wants to match the narrative that he's going to talk about, thrusting it upon someone based on text, which again doesn't tell you the tone of the person, and going after the tone as opposed to what's said. It seems to be a quite popular go-to for him.
Oh, and when it came to the whole Mythos Milwaukee thing, he assumed that I was following Steve and Dan. And when it came to criticizing him on something else, he said that I had been led, astray by these people who sound bright and shiny but are really just full of anger or whatever crap is it.
Because we all know women can't have their own opinions and things. They have to be led by a man.
And I was, leading the charge on that. I mean, I acted independently. I don't know when Dan sent his email. I sent my email and then I told Steve about it. And then I was curating his content that Seth saw. And that content was why he decided to disassociate himself from Mythicist Milwaukee's conference. Mm-hmm. Right. And so I was doing the activism. And yet it's the men that he treats like, oh, yes, she must just be following along. So, like you said, not the first time.
But it won't be the last.
Well, hopefully maybe someone will watch this and tell him and be, hey, Seth, maybe do this? So, yeah. Right. And then he switches it to what about the men's?
It's like, first, of course, we have the whole what about the men's, but then it's like the statement, how quickly would Twitter have ruined his life? And it's sort of like, it's building on this idea that there's this feminist cabal or hate mob that is just going around destroying the lives of men. This isn't said in, the sort of context of the first point was like, oh, I'm not saying this, but someone else may say it. And then he just switches to himself saying it, He doesn't say how long before someone says, then brings up the point. He goes, just imagine if a man had seen her about to fall and said nothing, how quickly would Twitter ruined his life? That's sort of building on the narrative. That's not taking it apart. That's not doing something helpful in deconstructing this sort of perspective of Twitter and feminism on Twitter and other social media sites. That's just saying this happens, I mean, yeah, we have examples where people's consequences online have consequences offline, but we have that everywhere, and to link this to sort of just feminism and, oh, there's this hate mob going around that would have destroyed someone's life had they not said something. Yeah, it's not helpful. All you're doing is sort of playing the false mid-ground here, saying you're a feminist, but you're not one of those feminists, which is something I have a bit of knowledge about. But yeah.
And his last point could have been some advice. Lena, don't be so hyperbolic in your speech next time.
Or maybe we just need to think before tweeting.
Yes.
Or delete always exists.
Yes, right? But no, what is he right?
Lena, you're ridiculous. But yeah. No reason explained why. No dissection of the point. No charitable notice given. Just,
should we go over those?
Yeah, there was a lack of charitable listening. There was a definite eagerness to misunderstand because, again, I don't think Lena genuinely wanted to go manhole diving. And the third point, all Seth is doing, he saw this tweet. He could have just ignored it and thought, I'll just memorize it, maybe mention it without mentioning the person, or I could even do a tweet in which I give the general outline without linking the person, right? But instead of doing that, knowing that he has this massive audience, he decides to go out and guess what? He decides to rubberneck everybody, say, look over here at this thing. Isn't it terrible? Here, have my victim blaming.
Recreational outrage in the Twitterverse.
Yeah. And it's like, free for free. He's broken each one of his own rules. It's like,
it is pretty astounding how in 3 lines he, or in 3, not sort of single lines, but 3 sentences in that tweet that we just read out, he actually managed to, point for point, knock each of those out of the park.
And it's just like, and it honestly, the general concept is good there. We should all be more charitable in our listening. We should try to understand to our best of our ability. And we can take the outrage act too far. But then just to ignore that, again, it's another case of just like the hyperbole, a different rule for him to everyone else. He's allowed to preach down to the pew, but the moment someone in the pew speaks up about his own actions, his own transgressions, suddenly it's not the same.
Right. Suddenly you're the problem and he's not the problem because he's right. And so obviously if he's right, then you must be wrong or you're, deliberately taking offense at something.
And the reason he's right, because he says he's right.
All right. So, yeah, we've looked at these 3 points, and as you've gone through them, yep, a little bit of, say, not practicing what you preach there, I'd say.
Definitely.
Right. So, yeah, we can go down now because okay, so she's, right. Okay. I don't know how much you want to go right down to where we started.
Yeah, because this is the more serious chat that I got tagged into at one point.
Yeah, so I don't know how you got tagged into it because I woke up and I saw your tweet and it actually was right
It was
after
you. It was you. You were
Oh,
responding to them, and you stated, if I can find it, it was something along the lines of this, is a funny way to sort of dissect what was going on.
okay.
You linked the satirical post we made,
Oh, right. Okay. Well, yeah.
and
Here,
that's how I got linked in.
okay. So yeah, you wanna. So this was the exchange that we had on Twitter. This morning I was traveling back
Oh
from
yeah,
home.
yeah. So should we read through it?
Yeah, you go ahead.
This just in, Seth Andrews, thinking atheist, has placed a ban on feminists using hyperbole to make a point. This once common rhetorical device was revealed to be the downfall of feminism rather than decades of constant organized harassment. We now turn over to our Kristi Winters for more.
Uh, Thanks, Essence of Thought. We all know the best way for men to show they are feminist allies is to use sexist stereotypes against women they disagree with to discredit and silence them. We've got expert mansplainer Seth Andrews here live on Twitter with his own examples.
Well, hyperbole and other rhetorical devices are literally equivalent to a Yorkie chocolate bar and should under no circumstances ever be utilized by a woman. There's international pressure to introduce the infamous jar test to ensure only men may utilize such devices.
And not a moment too soon. With women showing bravery, coming forward to talk about sexual harassment and assault, plus nonstop attacks on our reproductive freedoms, we certainly need Seth to use his platform to stop women using rhetorical devices to make a point.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
All right, so let me see now if I can get back to the main one, because we can also go through the more
serious
part.
Yeah.
And hopefully this will go in the right order. So if you need to have me open it up like a sub reply, let me know. Okay, so yep, there's our little snark, and I'm trying to get it to go farther down. Not going any farther down. Oh, here we go. It's just taking a little while. I'm trying to find, yeah.
I got to the bottom of where I stated it was irrelevant.
Because he didn't reply to that conversation.
The last bit they replied, he replied to me, then I replied to him once more.
Okay.
I linked on the side. If you go to the Google and click on it, I've sent you the link, and it should pull you up to that exact post, and it should have your post all above it.
Okay, but where? Oh, are you in the chat? I'm sorry. I'm sure.
Google Hangout.
Okay, in the Google Hangout chat.
Yes.
Okay, I have to stop sharing because I can't see my screen. Okay. So in the meantime, yeah, do you want to talk a little bit about what your concerns were when you guys had this conversation?
Yeah, I just got tagged into a more serious conversation, and I've just stated the first comment I've got here, which was, if the empowered vent, it was just a moment. If the disempowered do the same, then suddenly it's justification for the disempowerment and the disempowerment for everyone else in their group. If that group internalizes said narrative, it divides the disempowered group by infighting. And this is something that we've known about for a long time. It is there were a lot of concerns, for example, in the way that if Obama ever did something, bad, that would be used by the right as not just a reflection of Obama or Democrats, for example, but also a reflection on all black people. Because, being of a minority group in a position of power for once, they would use that as an excuse sort of thing. So that there is a higher standard where minority or disempowered have to be saints compared to those in power. If you scroll up, it should have the rest of the chat as well.
Right. So is that was your last one about disempowered via infighting? Was that the last quote you read?
That's the one I just read. That was the first one I came.
Okay. So then Seth's reply. Did you want me to read Seth's reply?
You can go back further if you want. If you want to go see what you wrote above, I mean, it's,
Oh,
it's
right.
your,
Yeah. Okay. There it is. That's my line. It's not that hard. Seth is using low-hanging fruit as recreational outrage to lecture women on how to express themselves. It's sexist BS, and he should be criticized, not enabled. Siding with the big boys versus other women isn't supporting women's voices.
Mhm. And then, of course, Seth came in after. This is after then I then did my comment about the empowered vent. It was just a moment, disempowered do it. Then suddenly it's like it's pathologized as a bigger issue. And he responded, or maybe someone just said something more mentally wrong-headed in public and they're being disagreed with. Not every tweet represents a cultural injustice warranting a Shakespearean defense of the disempowered. Sometimes people are simply being ridiculous, which I completely agree with, but the fact is, Seth took this, what he believes to be wrong-headedness and being ridiculous, that's what he states it as. He took that and he tried to turn it into something bigger.
Right.
He was chumming the water for drama, sort of thing. Our responses were not Shakespearean, they were not dramatic. I simply noted a very basic principle about, the double standard of the empowered versus the disempowered. And suddenly, apparently, that's the Shakespearean defense. I don't know why they made their original comment.
So, yeah, and when he talks about not misrepresenting people, what did she say that was monumentally wrong-headed? You know what my standard for monumentally wrong-headed is? Donald Trump.
Yeah,
Donald Trump says monumentally wrong-headed things, right? Using a bit of hyperbole about, making your own mistakes rather than having someone explain things to you or, a dude helping you out. It's not monumentally wrong-headed. And, and he's assuming she's being ridiculous.
It's also not because he's using hyperbole there with the whole Shakespearean defense.
Yes.
He literally uses hyperbole and critiquing someone about hyperbole, saying hyperbole is wrong-headed. It's like,
yeah, like, a man being destroyed by Twitter because he let someone fall into a manhole. That's not hyperbole.
It's just. I explain this with quite simply, and using that moment of venting to effectively go, look over here, this is why you're treated like shit, is an incredibly vile thing to do. Venting in a hyperbolic manner is not a justification for organized harassment and should not be used as a distraction tactic.
And can I just say, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. That was exactly the right thing to say. It was such a cogent point. You were so on point.
And nowhere was I attacking Seth. I was taking issue with what they were doing, which, if you go back to their own rules, they should also be taking issue with what they're doing. And all he could respond with was #drama. This sort of like started getting to me. The Shakespearean defense, the drama, and then later on he goes on about frothing. It seems like he's trying to bait me more, and or he's doing what noted earlier, he's assuming the tone of my voice. I was quite calm whilst doing this. I was watching Death in Paradise. I was catching up on that. So this was just, when you end up doing it so often, you get used to doing it just casually. I was just explaining some basic things. So I just explained, no, Seth, ethics. I've seen this shit before with every conservative going, well, can LGBT plus people expect their rights when you see how they dress at pride parades? Or hell, closest to the topic, how can you expect men not to rape if you dress like that? It's irrelevant. It is just tagging onto irrelevant factors to say, this is why this happens. Okay? It's not a justification. It doesn't stand as a justification at all. And of course, he just doesn't seem to understand the whole idea of a comparison, because he states, I attempted to relate your above statement to my original comment on Elena Dunham's post about men and manholes. It was like trying to staple jello to a Tasmanian devil. Have a nice froth and a good day.
And what is your point here? That basically you're using the Twitter to say, hey, look at what ridiculous person this is, as you say, chumming the water, and he denies even doing it.
Yeah, it's irrelevant factors, because he doesn't say some people will use this tweet in this way, and here is why using this tweet in this way is wrong. That would have been beneficial. Dismantle the narrative that a minority or a disempowered group has to be a saint 24/7 in order to be treated with respect and given their rights.
Tone police all the time. Ask for it nicely. Ask for it quietly. Ask for it silently. Don't bother me. Don't bother my life. Don't make me pay attention to this.
And then the irony is, when they do that, that's still not good enough. We see this here with Seth right now. I was very calmly talking to him as an adult, as an equal. And every comment comes back with an attack of a Shakespearean defense, drama, have a nice froth. It is quite clear provocation or attempt at provocation. He's trying to get me to explode, and all I'm doing is just writing rather calmly the issues with what I saw.
Seth has a position of power. He has a huge following. He puts something out there and he gets adulation back. So who he puts out there for fodder matters, and the critiques he makes matter. And there are people like I encouraged you to, and I hope you enjoyed the recommendation to watch Christiosity's video criticizing Jermaine Greer. There is a case where, yeah, someone did say something completely ridiculous, but for reasons that it's just hyperbole. Her comments actually could have people end up being hurt. Like her attitudes toward rape are just ridiculous. And that can be criticized. And she's a feminist. And a man can do it. Anyone can do it because they're bad arguments, right? Yeah. So there are, but he picked Lena Dunham for his fans to, scoff at. So do you want to finish off your other two comments?
Yeah, I just finished up with, let's go get them Seth, I said a lot of things as a member of the LGBT plus community, some of it out of sheer frustration and anger, wrong-headedness as you may term it. Other times I've done it deliberately, such as when I told a Christian I suck every dick I see, if I so please. Either way, it was irrelevant to the fact that LGBT plus people face discrimination. If you have a bad day, does someone come along and try to use that to justify stripping you of your rights and or the abuse you face? No, you're lucky in that regard. So maybe stop with the tone policing. Again, where's the frothing?
Yeah.
So I love the way he uses frothing for anger, and I've watched one too many saucy comedies where frothing means something else. So when I hear frothing, I think of something completely different.
I don't think I want to go any farther.
I don't want to go there.
No, he's going to get age restricted otherwise.
He's going to get age restricted. So yeah,
I think we then had a chat about. Oh, yeah. Do you want to finish up any more thoughts on this exchange?
No. You go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So we had this little banter back and forth, and then just kind of said that was kind of fun and funny, and then you kind of tagged me into the rest of the conversation when I woke up the next day, yeah, it was just really unbelievable how petulant he sounded. And the thing is, you were pointing to a way that power is used in harmful ways, not just in the Seth's instance, but in a lot of different instances. A lot of people face this kind of tone policing, or the way that they're held up as being representative of entire groups, as to be mocked. And he did that self-evidently, by the 3 rules we looked at, and his behavior didn't match up, right? So he was doing the outrage culture that he was saying he was trying to prevent. And when we had this conversation, sort of like we're going back and forth about all the stuff to unpack out of this conversation, this Twitter exchange, I just thought we should do a hangout. And I'm really glad we did, because it was very, very, I think, useful and rewarding to really, I saw a lot of connections that I hadn't made before through the process of talking about this. So yeah, I'm really glad we did this.
But yeah, it was just, again, for someone who presents themselves as someone who's reasonable and open, I used to listen to every The Thinking Atheist podcast. I used to play a video game at university called Monster Hunter. I used to just listen to him in the background. He presents himself one way, but the moment you try talking to him directly out of a situation that he has full control over, he comes out as this completely different person, and it's not a pleasant person either. Again, I just tried talking to him, and instantly he went into the defense of Shakespearean and drama and frothing. It's like, it's the worst thing to do. If you want to avoid drama, don't scream out drama. It's kind of like saying awkward when everyone's silent. If it wasn't awkward before, saying awkward in a silent situation will make everything awkward. It's the same for drama. It's just the worst thing to do. But
And in this case, I think, okay, we might have been we've probably been snarky.
yeah,
But on the other hand, we haven't been cruel and we haven't been entirely dismissive. I've been trying to, I
we
laid
try
out very
talking.
deliberately.
We try
Well,
talking.
yeah.
This is the last result. If we're a bit snippy now,
You,
then
you, I'm
hopefully
just saying,
people can understand why.
Seth and I
Mhm.
have a history, so he was never going to read me without a tone in my voice. And he's probably right. But in your case, he doesn't know who you are. I
Mm.
guess he saw you, and maybe he saw you interacting with me.
He's no,
But
he knows me once. I did a video response
okay,
defending one of his videos, and he did comment on the video, but that was like 2015. So
okay, right,
yeah,
quite a while
like
ago.
that's about it. Like there's also this thing I mentioned. I think I mentioned it just before the show, where he states that it doesn't have to be a Shakespearean defense about this and powered. Okay, forget the hyperbole about the Shakespearean defense. Focus on it doesn't have to be a discussion about the disempowered.
Right.
Okay. His very first comment was about feminism. Like, you opened the conversation, you took someone's quote who is apparently a celebrity feminist, okay, and so you can link it to feminism however you want. But you bring out feminism, and then you wonder why the conversation down below is talking about the disempowered. Uh, I don't get it. I just don't get it. Like, how does it come to that? Doesn't he see that he was the one who mentioned the F word? And of course, when he mentions the F word, I'm going to discuss what the F word typically involves. It is like being surprised that Christ is mentioned in a conference about Christianity. Just, oh God. By Sagan.
Well, yeah, so I pretty much have said everything that I wanted to say, and I've enjoyed this immensely, but I
Mhm.
also want to make sure that we kind of keep on, moving on to topics in case there's
Yeah,
anything that we
yeah.
missed.
You got a good example of how you can deconstruct a feminist.
Yeah. And also like this is okay, it's a little bit to poke fun at Seth, but in all honesty, we can I'm sure I sometimes lose my cool. I actually
Oh yes, we
practice
all
a
do.
lot of restraint on Twitter
We're all
because
human.
I am very aware that everything I do is watched and has been for a long time. And so I tend to go on the snark side rather than the aggressive side
Mhm.
because aggressive on Twitter will get you reported. And so snark won't. But one way for me to actually be snarky is to be completely serious and treat somebody's arguments as if they're completely serious. So I was
Mhm.
Michael Rowlands tagged me into, or I saw him having a conversation about someone asserting that boys have penises and girls have vaginas, and we went down this rabbit hole of discussing observation and empiricism. And he said, well, what is it? Why is it that we teach that people have 10 fingers if sometimes people have 12 fingers? I think,
Mhm.
well, it is the case that we actually have 8 fingers and 2 thumbs.
Yeah.
And if you can't get that biology right, why should I believe you that boys have penises and girls have vaginas? Just saying, you know. So you can have fun banter back and forth and be serious, and also I think sometimes has fun with snark. But if you are going to quote tweet somebody like Seth
Mhm.
did for the amusement of your followers,
And pretend like what is either hyperbole or venting. Again, I don't know what I think it is hyperbole. I'm banking on that, but Seth sees it probably as more venting. But to pretend it was super serious as well,
right? It was so
so
wrong-headed,
disingenuous.
monumentally wrong-headed, apparently. Yeah,
Mhm.
and you know what? If you're just going to be a jerk and tell other people it's fine to be jerks and Twitter is a place for jerks, that's one thing. But then if you lay out a 3-point plan of how to behave in social media to prevent recreational outrage from being a thing, don't
It's
engage in recreational outrage.
like Jordan Peterson never lie. Oh, but I'm just going to keep lying about the C16 bill even after being corrected by legal experts, sort of thing. It's just if you're going to list rules that you apparently live by, you better live by them.
Yes. Yeah.
I
Basically.
can acknowledge that people have bad days. I, with mental health issues, I have, yeah, my user's experience can be quite varied depending on how my mental health is on the day, and I'm trying to improve in that. But, yeah, this just got to me. It's just like, here I am calmly talking to someone watching Death in Paradise, and it's just, what are they doing? Seriously, what? Anyway.
So a bit of Twitter drama caught on YouTube.
Oh yes.
But I do hope that people watch it and learn something from it. I really do.
I
I think it
mean,
was.
I hope Seth learns from it. That's the main thing.
That would
You
be
know,
wonderful.
if he can just see that, yes, okay, he slipped up in this case, and then hopefully just I slip up a lot. Okay, I acknowledge that I slip up a lot, but then in the future when I start slipping up, I start becoming a little bit more aware about it, and I can cut it off and apologize a little earlier. You know, I'd love to see that sort of development. I'm not expecting Seth to bow down, to convert, to start wearing my merchandise or anything like that, but just see that what he wasn't doing wasn't charitable. It was clearly attempting to go out and misunderstand what was stated, and it was just chumming the water for drama. It was just to get traffic, and it's like to pretend more noble. It's just a case of the bigger you make yourself to be morally, the harder you fall when it comes up to you messing up, sort of thing. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I would say, it was the case. I was very concerned about Seth's participation in Mythicist Milwaukee when Carl Benjamin was there, because he would be lending a legitimacy to that. And in the end, he withdrew based on activism I did to bring what Carl had said to his attention. And he never thanked me for that. But I'm glad he did what he did. And that was the important thing, not that he thanked me. And this would be the case again. If people who watch Seth can kind of distill our points down and pass them on in a friendly way where he might be more receptive to them, and he changes his behavior as a consequence and doesn't engage in the kind of recreational outrage that he seems to be so offended by on Twitter, he doesn't have to say, "Thank you, Kristi." That's fine. I would just prefer him not, sort of taking low-hanging fruit celebrity feminists and trying to lecture them on how to speak about their issues on Twitter.
I expect my check in the mail.
That's Soros check. All right. Well, I think that's everything. This has been so much fun. I wish it could go on longer, but I think we've done enough of an analysis here. But
Okay.
thank you for being on. Oh, and you want to tell people a little bit about what's the most recent video you did on your channel? And I think I have a link to your channel already in the description box.
The most recent video, actually, I think it's a relevant one this time. That not including the mirrored one, because I recently mirrored anti-social media's video.
Yeah.
So not including that one. The one before that was anti-feminist thinks incredulity is an argument, I believe it is. I've got to wait till it opens up the full title. But it was just this one guy going, he's had guys hit on him before and he's been able to get rid of them. How can women have this problem in letting a guy know that they're not interested? It's like, of course, we just had the Texas shooting at the time. And it's like, you do realize this has been in the news recently, and this isn't the first time that a shooter has, come about, or even a murder. It's not always a mass shooting. A lot of homicides are carried out by people who are rejected. So it's very dangerous, and it's just because this one guy can't understand how it could be dangerous to a woman. Therefore, it can't be dangerous. It's just a feminist myth used to destroy lives and all this sort of thing. So yeah. Usual stuff. People
should go watch that and watch you break it down.
Yeah. It's quite long, but it's referenced. I always reference my videos. So,
Yes, and I am trying to get Kevin on for happy hour, either Friday or Saturday night. I very much want to do a special Kristi and Kevin's happy hour this week in Stupid Misogynists edition, because oh my gosh, has Twitter been blowing up with dumb people saying awful things about women. First, there was Paul Joseph Watson has been going off about beauty pageants and why they're not a problem, or and while talking about how feminists are ugly. Then someone else said something incredibly stupid. I can't remember. I started pasting these all into a running thread I've got with Kevin. I'm like, here's another one. Here's another one. But the one I was thinking of was no, it's just gone out of my mind. Candace Owens, dumb tweet going after the Me Too movement. Just wow. So I think maybe Black Pigeon Speak said something or something about women. So anyway, yeah, there's going to be hopefully a breakdown of those tweets, and whatever the middle. I feel like Otto in A Fish Called Wanda. What was the middle part again? Can't remember. remember the second tweet. But we're going to be doing that hopefully in the next couple days. So watch, I guess, Twitter or my Facebook page, because usually I give you guys no notice that a show is going to go live. So sorry about that, but that's my life right now. All right. So thanks again to my guest. At the channel, you can find Essence of Thought. And you guys, I guess all that's left to be said is that I've been Kristi. My guest has been awesome. Essence of Thought. Peter, thank you so much.
Thank you, Adam.
And you guys, of course, have been awesome. So goodbye from me and goodbye from Peter. Say goodbye, Peter.
Take care.
Or you can say goodbye, Kevin.
I want to say goodbye, Kevin. Kevin didn't turn up. I'm disappointed. No
Bye,
love for
Kevin. Bye, you guys.